In December 1943, Joy Goff stood in the lobby of the Air Transport Auxiliary Training Facility at Thame, Oxfordshire, 20 years old, holding a single suitcase, having never been inside an aircraft. The organization needed pilots urgently enough to train candidates from scratch through an ab initio program advertised in Aeroplane magazine. Out of 2,000 applicants, only 17 had been accepted. Joy was one of them. Her sister Yvonne, whose RAF pilot husband had been killed in a bombing raid over Berlin months earlier, stood beside her with an identical suitcase. Neither woman had a pilot's license. Joy had never even obtained a driver's license. Within 8 months, she would be ferrying Spitfires from factories to frontline squadrons across Britain. The Air Transport Auxiliary had been established in September 1939 as a civilian organization tasked with ferrying military aircraft between factories, maintenance units, and RAF squadrons. By late 1943, the organization operated 14 ferry pools across Britain and employed over 1,200 pilots from 25 nations. The work was essential. RAF combat pilots could not be spared for delivery flights, and the factories were producing aircraft faster than they could be moved to operational airfields. At Castle Bromwich, the Spitfire factory's peak monthly output reached 320 aircraft. Each one needed to be flown to safety immediately to avoid Luftwaffe bombing raids. The ATA had already lost 173 pilots to crashes, most of which were caused by weather, mechanical failure, or accidents during training. The organization flew without radios, without instrument training, using only maps and compasses in the notoriously unpredictable British weather. Joy's training at Thame began in January 1944 with 9 days of technical instruction before she touched an aircraft. The curriculum covered internal combustion engines, basic aircraft systems, meteorology, and navigation. The meteorology training was critical. Weather was the primary killer of ATA pilots, and trainees learned to read conditions, assess cloud ceilings, and calculate visibility from the ground. On the 9th day, Joy walked to the grass airfield and climbed into her first training aircraft. She flew 12 hours of dual instruction with an instructor before her first solo flight. The training aircraft were light single-engine machines, typically Miles Magisters or de Havilland Tiger Moths. Joy found the flying easier than taxiing. Without driving experience, maneuvering an aircraft on the ground felt awkward and imprecise. In the air, the controls made sense. By August 1944, after 8 months of training, Joy took her wings test at Thame. She passed and received her ATA uniform and classification as a Class 3 pilot, qualified to fly light twin-engine aircraft and single-seat fighters. Her first posting came immediately. Number 15, Ferry Pool at Hamble, near Southampton. Hamble was one of only 2 all-female ferry pools in the ATA, commanded by Margot Gore with Rosemary Reese as deputy. The pool's primary mission was to clear aircraft from the vulnerable Southampton area factories. Vickers produced Spitfires at Eastleigh. Cunliffe Owen built Blenheims, Aerocobras, Hudsons, and Lancasters. Airspeed manufactured Oxfords at Christchurch and Portsmouth. The factory at Hamble served as Britain's main Spitfire repair base. Every aircraft built or repaired needed immediate delivery to keep the production lines moving. The daily routine at Hamble began with pilots gathering in the operations room. Weather reports came first. If cloud ceilings were too low or visibility too poor, flying was cancelled and pilots waited, playing cards or writing letters. When the weather cleared, the operations hatch opened and delivery chits were handed out. Each chit specified the aircraft type, pickup location, and destination. Pilots compared assignments, asking each other what they had drawn and whether they had flown that type before. The ATA used handling notes, small booklets that provided basic information about each aircraft's controls, procedures, and characteristics. Pilots were expected to read the notes, memorize the key points, and fly aircraft they had never seen before based on that limited information alone. Joy's first Spitfire delivery came from the Vickers factory at Eastleigh. The Spitfire Mark IX sat on the taxiway, its Rolls-Royce Merlin engine ticking as it cooled from the test flight. Joy conducted the external inspection, checking control surfaces, landing gear, and fuel levels. She climbed into the cockpit and reviewed the handling notes one final time: throttle, mixture, propeller pitch, landing gear retraction, flap settings, fuel tank selection. The cockpit was tight, designed for combat pilots wearing parachutes and Mae Wests. Joy, strapped in, ran through the startup checklist and fired the engine. Merlin's roar filled the cockpit. She taxied to the runway, ran the magneto check, and received clearance from the ground crew. Takeoff was smooth. The Spitfire lifted at 95 miles per hour and climbed rapidly. Joy retracted the landing gear and leveled off at 2,000 feet for the ferry flight to the assigned RAF station. The flight lasted 35 minutes. Joy navigated by map and compass, following railway lines and roads to maintain visual reference with the ground. TA pilots were prohibited from flying above clouds or in instrument conditions. If the weather closed in, they were expected to land at the nearest available field and wait. The prohibition was practical. Without radio contact or instrument training, pilots caught above clouds had no way to navigate or communicate with ground control. Several ATA pilots had been killed attempting to descend through clouds and hit terrain. Joy landed at the RAF station, shut down the engine, and signed the delivery paperwork. An RAF ground crew member drove her to the operations building, where an ATA taxi aircraft, usually an Avro Anson, waited to transport pilots back to their ferry pool or to the next pickup location. Through late 1944 and into 1945, Joy flew multiple deliveries per day when weather permitted. She ferried Spitfires, Hawker Tempests, North American Mustangs, and Hurricanes. Each type had different characteristics. The Tempest was fast and powerful, but temperamental on the ground. The Mustang had excellent range, but required careful fuel management. The Spitfire remained her favorite. In her own assessment, flying the Spitfire was the nearest thing to having wings of your own. The aircraft responded instantly to control inputs, climbed rapidly, and handled smoothly in all flight regimes. Joy would eventually fly 18 different aircraft types during her ATA service, but the Spitfire stood out. The period leading to D-Day in June 1944 brought changes to ATA operations. Joy flew over southern England and observed military convoys massing in country lanes and fleets of vessels gathering in the Solent. The buildup was impossible to miss from the air. Everyone at Hamble knew what was coming. The pilots understood that many of the men they saw preparing for the invasion would not return. The ATA's role intensified. White Waltham and Aston Down were designated as invasion pools, responsible for delivering fighters to frontline squadrons at maximum speed. After D-Day, the ATA began teaching pilots to use radios for the first time as deliveries extended into Europe. Joy trained on twin-engine aircraft in January 1945, qualifying to fly the North American Harvard. The training came late in the war. By August 1945, Germany had surrendered, and Japan was weeks from capitulation. On August 11, 1945, flying operations ceased at Hamble. The ferry pool closed on August 15. The Air Transport Auxiliary officially disbanded on November 30, 1945. During the war, ATA pilots had ferried 309,000 aircraft of 147 types without radios or instrument navigation, relying entirely on visual flight in British weather conditions that frequently grounded operations for days. The organization had lost 173 pilots, including the famous aviator Amy Johnson, who died in January 1941 when her aircraft ran out of fuel over the Thames estuary and she bailed out into freezing water. Joy survived the war without serious injury, despite the constant danger from weather, mechanical failures, and the inherent risks of flying unfamiliar aircraft solo. After the war, civilian flying positions for women effectively disappeared. Joy left the ATA in September 1945 and trained as a teacher. She married Jiri Hartman, a Czech Spitfire pilot she had met while working at Lloyd's Bank before the war. The marriage ended in divorce in 1966. In 1968, while training as a teacher in Portsmouth, she met Charles Lofthouse, a former RAF bomber pilot who had been held at Stalag Luft 3 and worked on preparations for the 1944 Great Escape. escape. They married in 1971 and remained together for 30 years until he died in 2002. Joy had 3 children and spent decades teaching children with special needs. For most of her post-war life, her wartime service remained largely unrecognized. Public awareness of the ATA's contribution grew slowly. In 2008, surviving ATA members received commemorative veterans badges from Prime Minister Gordon Brown at a reception in Downing Street. The recognition came more than 60 years after the war ended. Joy attended with her sister Yvonne, one of the few times the ATA's work received official acknowledgement. By then, most of the 168 women who had served as ATA pilots were deceased. Joy and a handful of others remained to represent the organization. In May 2015, at age 92, Joy flew in a Spitfire for the first time in 70 years. Boltby Flight Academy arranged the flight at Goodwood Aerodrome to commemorate VE Day. Joy sat in the rear cockpit of a 2-seat Spitfire Mark 9 while a test pilot occupied the front seat. The aircraft climbed to altitude and performed gentle turns over the English countryside. Joy handled the controls briefly. The sound of the Merlin engine was identical to what she remembered. The smell of the cockpit had not changed. When she landed, she described the experience as making her feel young again. The last time she had flown a Spitfire had been July 31st, 1945, recorded in her logbook 68 years earlier. Joy Lofthouse died on November 15, 2017, at age 94. At the time of her death, she was one of the final 2 surviving female ATA pilots from World War II. Her service represented a brief period when women were permitted to fly military aircraft in Britain out of wartime necessity. When the war ended, that opportunity closed. The RAF did not officially accept female pilots until decades later. Joy's generation of ATA pilots proved that women could ferry fighters and bombers as effectively as men, flying in dangerous conditions without radio support or instrument training. The 173 ATA pilots who died during the war, including women from multiple nations, are commemorated on a memorial in St. Paul's Cathedral. The largest concentration of ATA graves is at All Saints Cemetery in Maidenhead, where 17 war graves represent pilots from 6 different countries. Joy's contribution was documented in her logbook, held at Maidenhead Heritage Center, along with 139 other ATA logbooks and thousands of photographs. The records show exactly which aircraft types she flew, how many hours she logged, and which routes she covered during 1944 and 1945. The documentation is precise because the ATA maintained meticulous records of every delivery flight. Each aircraft ferried was tracked from the factory to its destination. The system worked because it had to work. Without the ATA, RAF squadrons would not have received replacement aircraft at the rate required to sustain combat operations. The organization's civilian pilots, many of them women like Joy, who had never flown before 1943, kept the aircraft moving under conditions that killed 173 of their colleagues. Joy Lofthouse learned to fly in January 1944 and stopped flying in August 1945. 19 months of active service. She then taught children for decades, raised 3 children, and lived quietly, until historians began documenting the ATA's work in the 2000s. The recognition came late, but it came. Joy attended ceremonies, gave interviews, and helped preserve the memory of an organization that operated in the margins of the war effort, but proved essential to its outcome. She flew Spitfires at age 21 and again at age 92. Between those 2 flights stretched 70 years of ordinary life built on the foundation of extraordinary service.